the infratemporal fossa. Our lecture is concerning with the anatomy of the infratemporal fossa and its related important structures. This area or fossa is very important, lies deep in the skull, actually at the base of the skull, and it is deep to the masseter muscle here and the zygomatic arch right here. And this fossa or space is act as a portal or conduit for the neurovascular structures entering and even leaving the cranial cavity. The fossa has also communication with what is called the pterygopalatine fossa more deep here through what is called the pterygomaxillary fissure. And also the infratemporal fossa evident here in this view. This is an inferior view actually of the skull, and you can see here is the dotted area by yellow colored is the infratemporal fossa, and communicate with the temporal fossa more superior through this way. Okay, so the infratemporal fossa has boundaries formed by bones and muscles. Now the lateral boundary of the infratemporal fossa is formed by the mandibular bone. More particular is the condylar here at the T.M. joint, condylar process of the mandible, and even the ramus of the mandible. Here we are removing by the picture is removed the mandible. The ramus of the mandible is removed, so we can see the depth of the fossa. The medial boundary of the fossa is formed by the following muscles: the levator villi pallati muscle and the tensor villi pallati muscle right here, and also the superior constrictor muscle of the pharynx also present here, and also we have the lateral pterygoid muscle. We will see it I think in the next slides. So the medial boundary of the fossa formed by a group of muscles. The anterior border of the fossa is by the maxilla, the posterior surface of the maxilla, and the posterior wall of the maxillary air sinus forming the anterior boundary of the infratemporal fossa right here. The posterior boundary of the fossa is by what is called the carotid sheath and the contents of that sheath, which is the external carotid or even the common carotid or even the internal carotid artery that enters here through the carotid canal right here. So this is the location of what is called the posterior boundary, the carotid sheath and its contents, whether jugular vein, nerve, and even the internal carotid artery. So this is the infratemporal fossa here, while the roof of the fossa is formed by the sphenoid bone, particularly the greater wing of sphenoid right here, and the floor of the fossa, the inferior boundary is formed by the medial pterygoid muscle. We will see it in the next pictures and illustrations. Now the roof of the infratemporal fossa has its importance because it is the way of entrance or a portal of passage of the nerves and vessels are important here, like the mandibular branch of a trigeminal nerve here, which is the motor and sensory to the area in the face, and also the middle meningeal artery passing from the maxillary artery to the inside the cranium. So these are two structures that passes in or out through the foramen ovale regarding the trigeminal, the mandibular nerve, and the foramen spinosum is the way of entrance into the cranium for the middle meningeal artery. Now the contents of the fossa, actually we have three types of contents: muscular, vascular nervus. So we have muscles like the medial and lateral pterygoid muscle here. We mentioned that we will see the muscles in just a moment, and here in this illustration we can see the blue colored muscles. Two parts is the lateral pterygoid muscle and the forming one of the medial boundaries of the fossa, while the brown one is the medial pterygoid muscle with its two parts, superficial and deep, and this muscle forming the inferior, the lower, the inferior, or even called the floor of the fossa. Okay, now we have two muscles, medial and lateral pterygoid, forming the contents of the fossa. They are present within the fossa itself, and the masseter muscle and temporalis muscle, they are passing through, so they are inserted and originated into the borders or the boundaries of the fossa. Here we have the temporalis muscle and the masseter muscle right here, one of the muscles of mastications.